Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com, and today we're taking a closer look at and of course installing the Barton Short Throw Shifter with the black shifter and the white shift knob, available for the TR6060 in all 09 and newer V8 Hemi Challengers, with of course the manual transmission. Now you should be checking this out if you're looking to improve your driving experience here with a sporty, firm short shifter that reduces your throw up to 44%. The Barton Short Throw Shifter here is going to be for the guys looking for the more premium option in the category, looking for one of the best short throw shifters available for your Challenger. Now this guy here, like I said, reduces up to 44% in throw reduction. That is a crazy amount. It's definitely the most out of short throw shifters in the category there, and it's got all premium materials. This is a mix of billet aluminum construction mixed with steel, so it's super sturdy and strong, so even when you're beating the hell out of your Challenger, this guy can take the beating. Now, this one is the only shifter in the category, or really for your Challenger, that uses self-centering springs. What that means is it's going to help guide you into each gear properly every time. Now, a big problem with the factory shifter is it's super sloppy in its shifting abilities. Going from second to third or fourth to fifth or even back can really be sloppy and cause a lot of misshifting, especially second to third. Not going to be the case here with this shifter because of those self-centering springs. It guides you right back into the center every time, so going from the left gate to the middle gate is going to be firm and precise. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the table and talk about them side by side between this and stock. This one in particular uses a black shifter, and as you can tell here, that's this billet aluminum shifter connected to your factory shift boot here. It also has the Barton name laser etched into the surface, which I think looks super good. Now this one has the white shift knob. Now this is a cue ball style shift knob, and if you're not into the white, I think it gives a nice contrast to the interior, but black is an option as well. You can also get a brushed aluminum base if you're looking to switch that up instead of have the black here. Now this guy comes in right around 475 bucks, which again puts it at the top end of the spectrum. It's a pricey piece, but it's something that you're getting that's gonna last you a long time, can shave some time off your ETs if you're hitting the track. Having that 44% shift reduction can really make a huge difference in shift times. If you're not looking to spend this much money, there are some other options out there that are a little bit cheaper of an alternative. Might save you a few bucks, but definitely won't have the self-centering springs, and you might even still have some of those missed shifts. So if you're looking to eliminate all that, this is the way to go. The install, I am still giving 1 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. I know that sounds unbelievable when it comes to a shifter, but you can do it in your driveway at home with, I'd say, about an hour, maybe 2 from start to finish. You're really just taking this entire center console off, which is just a couple of nuts and bolts, and I'll show you that. And then underneath of that, you're just unbolting a few 10 and 13 millimeter bolts to get your factory shifter off, and then you're just reassembling. So I'll walk you through every single step of that process here from uninstall to install, so let's get started. Tools used in this install include an impact gun. I have a 3/4 ratchet and a 1/4 inch ratchet, extension, short and deep 10 millimeter sockets, 8 millimeter deep socket, 13 millimeter short and deep sockets. I use a swivel socket. I definitely recommend that to get to those hard to reach places. 7/32 hex socket, Phillips head and flathead screwdrivers. 8 millimeter ratcheting wrench is very helpful, along with a 3/4 wrench. First step of the uninstall is to get our center console out of the way. So we're going to pop open the center console here, and then use the cup holder as a little bit of leverage to pull this straight up. Now that dislodges the back, and then we can just lift up from the front to disconnect there. Now it is really difficult to see underneath of it, so what I find to be the easiest method here is to actually just twist it so it's sideways, and that way you can peek under a little bit. Now, the shift knob doesn't screw off itself, so what we're gonna do is pop out this entire chrome trim with our leather shift boot all in one piece, and then remove the rest of the trim here. From underneath, I'm gonna put my fingers right on the inside of this chrome trim next to our leather boot, and I'm gonna hold down the rest of the trim, and I'm just gonna push up. Now if you see, I can push up here, and it's pulling up this entire middle section. I don't want that to happen. I just want the chrome to come up. So if you just push up on that, you can get that to dislodge. So we're gonna do that all the way around, just like that. And now we can feed that through the middle. On the inside, we have 2 harnesses we need to disconnect. One's for this center console area where the cup holders are, and the other one is for our cigarette lighter. All right, so this harness here, you're just gonna pull up on the red locking tab, and then pinch to disconnect. Now for the cigarette lighter, it's similar. You're just gonna pinch the top here and pull straight back to disconnect that, and then this is free, and I'm gonna set that down on our passenger floor. All right, next step, we have to grab a Phillips head screwdriver. There's a bunch of Phillips head screws we need to remove the plastic trim underneath of that center console portion we already took out. We have 2 up under the navigation unit, this whole section there. Then we have a couple all across the sides, and then a few under the center console storage. So I have my Phillips head screwdriver here, and I'm just gonna work these guys off. It's a little tight down here as well. You just wanna make sure you're not dropping them into the center console. I think that can be a little bit of a pain in the butt to get out. Basically what you do on one side, you're almost just exactly repeating on the other. All right, so now we can open the center console. We have 2 Phillips heads right here. All right, now inside your center console storage, you're gonna reach down and pull out the bottom tray. Now you're really just gonna pull it out by hand, looks just like that. Just pinch both sides and pull straight up. Underneath of that, in each corner, there is one 10mm bolt. So if you're looking at it like this, there's a bolt here, here, and here, right at the bottom. So we're gonna get those out of the way, and then the center console should be able to disconnect from there. So let's grab our socket and our impact gun with an extension and get to it. All right, so those 4 bolts are actually 8mm bolts. So I've got my 8mm socket on an extension on my impact gun. I'm gonna get those guys out. All right, so reach in, that's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4, and you can see the console's loose now. This guy's being stubborn, and there's 4. So we're gonna put that aside for safekeeping. All right, now before we remove the console, if you head up here in front of your shifter, you'll see this harness here. We have to disconnect that, so pinch from underneath and pull, and there you have it. Now I know this is gonna be tough to see, but directly inside of the storage, you'll see another cigarette lighter. So we have to disconnect that harness, and you can do that from the front here. You're just gonna really pinch and pull back just like we did on the one on the front. Now it's, again, tough to get to. If you can't get to it from the front, you can lift up on your storage unit and get it from underneath. There you go, just like that. From here, let's remove the entire center console. All right, so now you can see underneath the center console, and this here is the air conditioning duct that goes to the back vents behind your center console storage unit. Now this guy is just held in with a push clip here. We're really just gonna pull up and disconnect. Then it's really just shoved back under your center console. So we're just gonna pull that out and set it aside. Next, what we're gonna do is remove these 2 bolts holding the shifter handle to the actual unit. Now I'm gonna use a 13mm deep socket to get this guy off. All right, so that slides right out. We can set this aside. Now this entire piece all around is just a rubber plating. We're gonna remove this guy by pulling back pieces of the carpet here and just lifting straight up and out. All right on top here, we have a 13mm bolt, and then we have 3 bolts on the side that look like maybe 8 or 10s. Now this entire plate's gonna have to come off to gain access to the shifter. Now we have 6 total 10mm nuts. We have 3 on this side, 3 on that side underneath the carpet. So I got my impact and extension. I'm gonna get these off. I'm gonna use a swivel for those top 2, so I'll come back to that at the end. All right, so now I got a swivel socket on the end here, and that should help us out getting at this angle. So 1 on the other side. All right, so now we can lift up on this metal plate. All right, so now what we're gonna do is basically just lift up on this rubber boot and pull that guy up and around. All right, next up we have our 10mm bolt here going straight through our shifter assembly. I'm gonna use a 10mm ratcheting wrench for this. It's a little longer so I can have a little bit more leverage, and we're gonna get this guy off. All right, so now we're looking down here. This little tab up here that goes over the lip is a pin. This pin is basically going left to right, just like this. What we have to do is take this tab and rotate it toward the front and then slide that pin out. I'm gonna use a flathead screwdriver here, and if you guys have a little hook, that would go a long way as well. Oh, there you go. Rotated it and started to slide this guy out, and it comes out just like that. Now you don't want to drop it down, but if you do, it should fall straight underneath the vehicle onto the floor. So I'm going to set this guy aside. There's also another one on the other side that we're going to have to work out, and that's going to be a little bit tougher for you guys to see, but it's the exact same thing. There you go. All right, mine just fell to the ground, but I can see it there on the floor. So what we're gonna do now is lift up on this shifter and pull it all the way out. Now we can set this whole thing aside. We got our factory shifter off of our 13RT next to me, and it's on the table next to our Barton Short Throw Shifter. Let's talk about some similarities and differences between the two kits. As you can see, the factory shifter assembly is pretty much all one piece, with the exception of the factory handle and boot. Now, we won't be reusing the handle, obviously, but the boot will get transferred over. We'll talk about that later on. Now, the new shifter from Barton here is, as you can see, multiple different pieces on the table that will have to get assembled differently. So you'll see that that alone is a little bit different. The big key to take away there is that the factory shifter handle, which is this guy, is completely detached and separate from the shifter assembly. That's going to make for a completely quiet shifting experience. Your factory shift handle here that attaches to the handle itself with the knob is pretty much all one entity in the sense that you'll get a lot of NVH with this, or noise, vibration, and harshness. Detaching that shifter completely and assembling it using these billet aluminum pieces are going to help make sure that it's minimizing, if not completely eliminating, NVH. The other thing to mention here is your factory shifter does not have self-centering springs. What that basically means is shifting from second to third or fifth to fourth or vice versa can be pretty sloppy and often cause a misshift. Having self-centering springs like the ones in your Barton shifter here help make sure that you are clicking into gear every single time. You'll feel that when you're coming from fifth back down to fourth, it wants to snap back into neutral and go to fourth, making it a firm and precise shift, all thanks to the built-in self-centering springs. A lot of technology has gone into the Barton shifter to make sure it's not only giving you a more firm shift, but a more precise and accurate shift every time. Now, I know I talked about this earlier, and this is a really big selling point. Another big difference is the throw reduction. Your factory shifter here is an absolute pig to get from one gear to the next. It feels like the longest throw ever. Your Barton shifter is going to reduce that by 44%. That is one of the biggest, if not currently the biggest option in the category as far as shift reduction. It's going to make a huge difference, and it's so much sportier in driving experience. Now, we are going to have to transfer over just a couple of components. Like I said, the shift boot, we're not going to get to that just yet. The center linkage is going to transfer over to the bottom portion of your new Barton shifter. Now, it's got a completely new assembly here. It's just going to reuse that bolt and that piece of steel. You're basically bolting that up to your billet aluminum, but it also has steel components in there to add extra strength. We all know that we beat the hell out of our shifters sometimes, and this guy here is going to take that beating. So let's transfer over that factory middle linkage, put it onto this, and then we'll head back into the vehicle. All right, so what we're gonna do here is just turn our stock shifter assembly on its side and get this 10mm bolt off. I've got an impact gun here, which I definitely recommend using. It's gonna make life a lot easier. This guy is super tight on there. It's got some blue Loctite on the end there. So holding this down using a ratchet can be a little bit difficult. So what I'm gonna do is use this impact gun. All right, you can see the blue Loctite there wanting to keep it on. So with that out of the way, let's slide this guy off of the factory assembly. We can set that aside and assemble this onto our new Barton. It's basically going in the reverse order. It's going to slide right on over these bushings. Now, if it is a little tight, Barton recommends using 400 grit sandpaper and just sanding the bushing down a little bit, just enough to slide this guy on, but it doesn't look like we're having any problems. So we're just going to keep it on as is. thread that factory 10 back in there. And again, I'm just going to use that impact gun to put it back in place. Next up, we're going to take this shift boot off. Now, we have a 6-speed here. We're going to flip this guy around. And on the back side, you will either have one of two things. One, you'll have this plastic collar like we do. Or two, you'll have jam nuts. Now, jam nuts are basically just two nut collars attached to each other. You just loosen them up opposite direction and slide it right off. Now, the plastic one's a little bit more of a pain in the butt. You can see on this side, and I'm going to use a very thin flathead screwdriver, you can see this tab here at the top. Now this tab splits right down the middle, this plastic collar going around. So basically, I'm going to use my flathead to lift this guy up, and this whole plastic collar is going to come back around. Now ours is a little bit up already. Yours may be flush up against the inside of the leather shift boot. So what you're basically going to do is just pry up and out like that on both sides. Just like that. And now it doesn't want to go all the way up. It gets wider up here. So we're just going to have to separate them. Just like that. And now we can slide the boot through the bottom. Just like that. Now we can set this guy aside. Basically, we're going to slide these two rods into the trans where those two pins were. So we're going to push those guys into position. And then what we're going to do is bring this rod forward to line up with that top. Now, I'm going to put these pins in place first. And in order to do that, it's going to be a little tight. So we're going to put this guy all the way on the right, and we're going to have to rotate the tab back down into the same position it was when we took it out. So just like that. Now the one on the opposite side here was facing up. So we'll slide it into position and then rotate this up just like that. Go. You can use a Phillips head or a flathead like I just did to get it in position, and now we just have to rotate it up for it to click back in. Here we go. Perfect. Now we just do the same thing on that other side. All right, with those pins back in, all the way on the left and the right, let's bring this guy back into position and slide that 10mm bolt that had that blue Loctite back in position. Perfect. Now I'm going to grab that 10mm ratcheting wrench and get to work putting it back on. All right, so now let's take a look at this billet aluminum block. You'll see it has two open squares. Now, both of those squares are completely surrounded with a rubber bushing. Now, what this is for this fork on the back side of the shifter. You'll see it slides right on into place and has a stud at the top. This is going to hold it to that metal plate that went right on over that was bolted down. If you remember from the Uninstall, we had a black plate over top with a 10mm nut and 6 8mm nuts. Now that's what this is going to hold on to, and the rubber bushings are going to help it be extremely quiet, eliminating that NVH, or noise, vibration, and harshness. It's just rubber on metal instead of metal on metal. All right, the next step, we're going to take our black metal plate along with the rubber gasket or grommet included in the kit here. Now this thing has a slit in the middle, and that slit is going to go right around this open hole. That way there's rubber on the top and rubber on the bottom, preventing any metal on metal contact. So this is going to cancel out any of that NVH that we talked about earlier, the noise, vibration, and harshness. You can see on this grommet or gasket here, it says up, front, up. So that's obviously going to be the front of the vehicle facing up. So we're going to make sure that that is oriented properly, and we're just going to slide this guy in. It's a little tedious to get this to slide in properly, but it is a perfect fitment. So you just have to work it all the way around this circle on both sides. Perfect, just like that. I'm going to push that toward the front, and now we can slide it in underneath of the carpeting and onto the studs. All right, so once you have the plate on and the grommet seated properly right around the shifter assembly, we're going to pull this guy up so the stud comes through and put that 13mm nut back on. I'm going to thread that all the way down by hand for now. Now we can let go. Now we can put on the rest of the 10mm nuts all around the edges and then come back and tighten them down. All right, next we can take this big rubber piece that goes right on top of that metal plate. We're gonna slide that guy right back under the carpeting. All right, so the next step, we're gonna start assembling the rest of our shifter before we finish on our console. Now we have two metal or billet brackets. They're gonna go right around the sides like this so that the slot cutouts are facing the inside. Now, inside there will be another bracket that will fit right through the middle like a fork. Now, in order to attach this, we have 4 13mm bolts along with split washers and flat washers that are gonna go right through here and then through the threaded holes on the shifter assembly that we already installed. So I'm gonna start threading these guys in by hand all the way down. And you wanna line them up so that this is flush up against each side. All right, so now I'm gonna take my ratchet and my 13mm socket and just tighten these guys up. Perfect. Now we're basically gonna do the exact same thing for the other side. All right, now when we do it on the other side, just make sure that this open slot is facing the other one. All right, for our next step, we're gonna put this fork in. Now this guy is gonna slide right into these two slots. Now if you have trouble sliding this guy in, you can loosen up these bolts and just get these guys enough to wiggle, and that should be enough to slide this right through. Now the reason we're putting this in here is our shifter assembly that will attach the shift knob is gonna attach just like this. Now you'll see that it has a very particular cutout on this side. That's gonna be on the driver's side. All right, so we're sliding that guy in. Grab the shorter 13mm bolts along with, again, split washer and flat washers. And you're gonna line up the threaded holes in the middle and screw these guys in by hand. Now you do have a little bit of room to angle this any which way that you'd like. If you'd like to angle it a little more to the driver's side, you can do that. I'm just gonna go for that neutral position straight up and down. Now you can grab your 13 socket and tighten these guys down. All right, next up, we're gonna put our shifter handle here. Now this guy is gonna fit right on the edge here on our driver's side. Now it's got a circle opening and then more of an oval shape. The circle opening is gonna get this hex screw with just a split washer through the middle like that. The bottom portion there is gonna get a flat washer and a split washer like that. All right, and there are threaded holes right on the assembly that we just installed. I'm gonna start with this top bolt with just a split washer, go right through. All right, now I'm just gonna thread the bottom one through as well. Now with this, you will have room for adjustment as well. Now you'll notice that the bottom is curved. This allows you to make adjustments in what the angle you would like on your shifter handle. You can angle it more toward the driver, which I think most people will do. Now what I'm gonna do is take my 7/32 hex socket and just thread these guys all the way down, keeping the angle that I want. Now I can take my ratchet and tighten those down. All right, it's not quite time to put the shift knob back on. That'll be the very last step. So what we're gonna do now is just start reassembling our center console. First things first, we're gonna put our air duct that goes back to the passenger seats in the rear right through. Now that just goes straight into that slot. And now we have a plastic retainer clip that'll clip down right over here, just like that. All right, so now we can put our actual center console back in. I'm just gonna lay it down for now while I pull through all of the wiring into position, making sure that it is in the proper location. All right, so we're pulling those through. You're gonna make sure that your cigarette lighter that goes under the center console is plugged in first. Next, the wiring at the front end is gonna come through. All right, so next we're gonna push this guy forward. I'm gonna plug in this unit down here. Perfect, and then our cigarette lighter will get plugged in just a little bit. Now, if you remember, we had multiple Phillips head screws that went through here, here, and then all along the sides. Before we do that, however, I want to bolt down the entire center console from inside the storage unit. All right, so now if you remember, we had 4 8mm screws that were holding in the bottom of our center console storage unit. You want to make sure that those holes are lined up, which it looks like they are, and then we're going to feed them through the bottom. I find it easiest to use an extension along with my 8mm socket just to get them in place. All right, next I can tighten these down lightly with my impact gun. All right, so next let's just put in that insert into our center console storage and we can shut this guy for now. All right, so next is gonna be our Phillips heads. We have 2 up at the front and then all the way back down to our storage unit. All right, so now we have 2 underneath the lid of our storage. We're gonna open up our center console like I have here, and we're gonna plug in the rest of the wiring to our center console trim with our cup holders. All right, so we've got our cup holder light here that's gonna get plugged in, and then we have our cigarette lighter, which will be toward the front. Perfect. All right, so now we can feed this toward the front and snap it in. All right, so next up is going to be our shifter boot. Now what I'm gonna do is just feed the leather boot while it's inside out over the shifter handle and then clip the plastic trim into place. Once you have that clipped into place, just push down the leather boot. To get the leather around the collar on the shifter base, what we're gonna need to do is use our flathead screwdriver carefully, trying not to scratch the unit. Pry it into position. Just like that. So now it's hugging around this ring. There's a little indentation at the base here of the shifter handle that this leather boot can sit flush around, and that makes it look a little bit more OEM. All right, now the last step here, once we have your shift boot in place, is to grab the jam nut collar and your white shift knob included in the kit, and we're gonna install these. Now the jam nut collar is gonna help keep the shift knob tight through your driving experience. Just thread that guy all the way down to the base, and then crack it loose a little bit so it's free to move. Then take your shift ball, your shift knob, and tighten this guy on. Now we're going to tighten this all the way down, and as you can see, it may not tighten completely straight as far as the shift pattern is concerned. So what we're going to do is adjust the collar at the base to allow the ball to be in the proper orientation, so just like that. Now you can tighten it with your hand, and then I suggest taking your 19mm wrench and just hugging that collar up against the ball tight with that tool. And that way, even when you're pounding the shifter back and forth, this isn't gonna break loose. That's gonna wrap up my review and install for the Barton Short Throw Shifter, available with the black shifter and white shift knob for the TR6060 or manual transmissions, available for the 09 and newer V8 Hemi Challengers. You should get yours right here at AmericanMuscle.com.